This is House Planning Help episode 211. Hello, I'm Ben Adam Smith, and this is the podcast for you if you're interested in self-build, because I'm exploring what houses we should be building in the 21st century and trying to break down the major roadblocks that may get in our way. Coming up in this session, I want to introduce you to my main contractor, that's Mark Feldman from Mars Builders. I'm also keen to see things from his perspective, going into the tender process, running a local business, and how he views a contract like this. If you're a subscriber to the YouTube channel, you may actually have seen Mark already on the vlog. It's a very weird thing, the timing, because on the podcast, you haven't yet met him, yet on YouTube, you might have done, and then anyone who's an email subscriber, I'm actually sending you real-time updates. So I think if I ever do this again, I've got to think of a better strategy, because it's hard to keep up turning everything around in time, so there inevitably is some form of delay. Anyway, if you haven't seen the vlog, that's a good place to go and see Mark as well if you like this interview today. youtube.com/house planning help. And the idea of the vlog, there's a bit more video diary style to it, that I'm just sharing a few thoughts as we go along, and then if you want the in-depth stuff, that's available in the hub, so I'll tell you about that a little bit later on in the podcast. So let's get to the interview with Mark. He is our main contractor now, hurrah! Although there will be another episode. As I mentioned, timeline's all a bit confused here, where we signed the contract, so that will be coming further down the line. But I thought it'd be interesting just to have a chat with him first. Also, this is his first passive house project, so how does he approach it? How does he price it? We're going to dig into all of those sorts of things. First up, though, I asked him for a little bit of background about himself and his business.
My working life started as a apprentice carpenter, carried on with that for a couple of years, and then I went into site management, like trainee site manager for 2 or 3 years, which gave me a good wide experience of the organisation side of building. I then went back to a smaller contractor, carried on with site carpentry, and from then moved on and started out on my own, which was to start with small carpentry jobs, but then slowly built up into larger extension work and refurbishment projects, that sort of thing. From there, we've moved on to large extensions and new builds when they come up. It's stuff that I've done for other contractors, but it's nice to do it for yourself.
How many years have you been going?
My business has been going since about early 90s, I think 92, 93. I started working on my own with just one other person. Built it up slowly and went VAT registered about 8 years after that or something, and then it's built up in a limited company a few years ago.
And when you go through all of these projects, you've mentioned carpentry, but do you find yourself pulled into block work? I mean, how do you get these jobs? Do they say, we want this style, this, a bit like the tender process, or are you involved in the design and build sometimes?
I've got a carpentry background, but the small company I worked for and did most of my apprenticeship and went back to were general builders, and we were doing mainly refurbishments and extensions, and we did the jobs from start to finish. So from an early stage, I got involved with all the groundwork, drainage, a little bit with brickwork and block work, and right through all the carpentry through to first and second fixing carpentry.
Can you do everything on site? I know that you would never want to these days, but are those all skills that you have more or less?
I can do most things, little bits of electrics, plumbing, little bits, but I would never touch gas stuff, but I don't have to do it. We just do odd little bits when needed. Can do little bits of plastering, but again, not to plasterer's standard, so we don't get involved with that side of it. But we can do most things, but stick to the main things that I'm proficient at.
How does a new job come along?
We get our work from various sources. A lot of the work comes through recommendations from previous clients, and also we've got quite a good presence on the internet. We get quite a lot of inquiries through the internet, and we get some work from people seeing the vans around and signs, that sort of thing. We don't actually do any proactive advertising other than the signs and the vans.
Do you pick and choose what you want to take on, or do you take on everything that comes your way?
Yeah, I tend to decide on the size of the jobs that come through. Small jobs we don't normally get involved with unless we've got a big job that's got a bit of a gap in it, and then if something small comes on, we might fit that in. On the whole, we try to stick to the larger extensions or the new builds. That I like to set up a base for a good 6 months and know that we've got that work for that period.
So does that mean that the amount of pitch time is actually fairly small?
Not really, because with the recommendations, we tend to win more of the jobs. With inquiries from the internet, then it's a much lower percentage that you win because you're not known to the client other than seeing you on the internet. So we're not the cheapest contractor. We like to feel that we provide a good standard of work, and that means that our prices are a bit higher. We also, when we're not given a specification, like we've got a specification on this job which is very detailed spec to price to, when we're not given that and we're pricing purely from the drawings, then we basically spec the jobs ourselves, and that makes it quite detailed, and it means that we give a very comprehensive quote covering as much of the work as possible. But it can mean that we appear more expensive compared to other contractors, but in the long run the other contractors would constantly add additional works and extra items, taking it normally past the figure that we would be at.
And I've done many a quote for videos over the years, and a certain amount fall by the wayside, others get taken. I think you're exactly right. You've got to price yourself where you're happy to be, and certainly concentrating on really good jobs. What does it look like, though? We've given you this tender package, and just even checking it as well as we possibly could took us a long time. So can you tell us about when you receive those documents and what you like to do?
When I get the tender package through, I obviously spend quite a while looking through the drawings, and then go through the specification, try and highlight if there's anything unusual, which on your job there was plenty.
We'll come to that in a minute.
Yeah. So I try and highlight the unusual things, so that make notes of things that stand out that I wouldn't just normally know the prices of, so I can then research and get prices on those items. And it's literally just a case of working through the spec. I mean, we have to rely on the fact that the architect and the client has got the spec accurately and the details on the spec match the drawings. It's not for us to double check that, really, because that should have been done by the time it gets to us. Yeah, it's just work through it and spend quite a lot of time, and maybe when it is finished, leave it a couple of days and come back to it and go through it again and see if there's anything you've missed or if it seems to make sense again.
And how do you build in your profit to that? Because you want to make sure as a business owner that you're going to walk away with a profit, but sometimes it's a little bit vague. And how do you do it?
Some items, when it's spec'd by an architect, some items have a profit and attendance allowance next to them, normally when it's supplies of items that have got provisional sums. On the other items, just tend to add the profit as I go, which so it would be labour and materials, and allow a bit of profit on top of that.
And also you allow for your own time so that you cost that up, so that is just pure profit?
Right, part of my time in the preambles really is I put a cost in for site management, so we'll allow maybe a day or two a week throughout the project that would be for just organisation and management time, because there's a lot of time spent either in discussion with the architects, looking things up on the drawings, just organising and keeping on top of what the guys are doing and not actually doing any productive work.
Because when you get to this stage as well with a build, it's going to demand a number of people, and that changes throughout, doesn't it? So your role really is that of a manager, is that correct?
Yeah, that's a big part of my role is manager, or managing the works and mediating the trades. And I always see myself as a bit of a pacifier that between trades and clients and trades and trades, and make sure everyone gets on and it all gets done in the right order and the right way, with hopefully as little problems as possible.
And how do you like to split your time then? When a project like this is underway, what would you be doing on a day-to-day basis?
I don't really schedule my time out through the works. It just depends. In the early stages, when the brickwork and blockwork's going on, I have a bit more time to get on top of materials and things in advance. As it moves forward, I'll probably get a bit more productive myself, hands-on. So I just do the organisation as and when it's required. When people ask questions, I answer them and sort the information out. I do have to tend to do a bit in the evenings and weekends to catch up on the paperwork side of things.
And will you have a lot of other jobs going on at the same time? How does that fit into it?
Depending on the size of the main job we've got and the intensity of what's going on, we may only have that one job, or we may have something small going on in the background, or little bits that come up that we just fit in.
What about the transition then? Our job finishes. How do you know you've got your next few months sorted out?
We price up, and when we're pricing the work, one of the big questions is when people want to start their work and if they're prepared to wait until the date that we give them. And hopefully if someone, the sort of people we want to work for are the sort of people that want someone decent, so they're prepared to wait, hopefully. So we have a transition period. Normally, the jobs can sometimes overlap a little bit, maybe a few weeks. So we're doing the finishing off bits and then starting the groundwork on the next job, and brickwork can be starting whilst we're finishing the main job. Again, it depends on what is involved in the finishings. If we've got all the exterior landscaping and that side of it to do as well, then we might wait until we're totally finished and then move on and start afresh.
So what are the typical gaps that you might have for someone? You've priced up the job, they're going ahead. How many weeks would it be at the least versus the longest?
Yeah, it varies a lot. When we're at the beginning of a project, so at the moment we've got about 7 months left on the project we're on. Then if anyone inquires at the moment, we've got a job to follow on, which is another 6 months. So
you've already got one?
Yeah, we've got something lined up.
And what stage is that at the moment?
It's another new build, and the plans are just going in for building regulations. But the job's been priced and the client wants to go ahead, so it should all just follow on.
Very nice. What about this job in particular then? What were you concerned about?
This job, no real concerns. I mean, other than making sure that we've covered everything price-wise, trying to organise the costs for the stuff that we don't normally do, the airtightness stuff, really.
Well, that's often what I get told when people do Passive House for the first time. It's very difficult to know how much things will cost, particularly doing plastering on this masonry build, and how many days, weeks to allow for that. So they price in risk. So is that something that you've been careful about?
I've been careful with the pricing, and not so much risk, because I feel that we've got enough experience to know what it should take. A bit of an allowance. I mean, it's really, we've been involved in, not in a full airtight passive house, but we've been involved in carrying out extensions which have been required to be as airtight as possible, using the same sort of ideas with everything being taped up for airtightness. So we know how much that takes and how much tape tends to get used. So we've made allowances for that. We've just covered costs, and luckily it's been broken down quite well by the architect, so we're able to price individual items, which makes it a lot safer, because we're not guessing what we've got to do the airtightness. We've just got to research and look into what the architect specified.
Certainly now we're underway, I think I appreciate how, if you are going to go down the tender route, the more detail you can put in and the less you can change throughout. It just makes sense, doesn't it? And I assume that's from your side as well.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, sometimes architects can go too far with detail, and you end up pricing every little item down to the last screw almost, and everything gets a little bit added onto it, so it can make it quite a bit more expensive for the client if it's too detailed for a specification. I think with this job, it's about right. It's got the detail that we need to cost the job effectively without being over pedantic. So
you don't need to know every screw, do you? You need to know roughly how much insulation am I going to have, how much it's going to cost.
Yeah, I mean, it's not really quantified by the architect. It's specified, so we've got to do the quantifying.
Ah, okay. So that you have done enough buildings to know. Oh, that's interesting. Okay. Also, these PC sums, you have mentioned it already, but I think it's worth explaining to anyone that hasn't gone into this process. So do you sometimes find projects with a lot of PC sums?
We can do. Again, it depends on the architect and the client. Some projects will have clients will just accept that they're providing bathroom suites and kitchens and floor tiles and floor finishes, and there's no PC sums or anything in there for that. They're just accepting that they've got a cost involved in providing those items, whereas other projects, such as the one we're on currently, will have a lot of PC sums which will cover all those items. So the client's got a clearer idea of where they're going, although they are just provisional, it can change.
And it's worth pointing out in this project that the contract administration is happening through the architect. So that works quite nicely, does it, that you have one source, instead of us speaking to you and saying, oh, we need this change, and you going ahead and then doing it. Do you find that simpler as a contractor too?
I think it needs to be either one way or the other. We do it both ways. If we're working where an architect's involved, they need to be in control, and the client works through the architect, and we work through the architect, and it works well that way. Other contracts, the client doesn't necessarily employ the architect to administer or oversee the works. They just have the architect do the drawings and come back to them with any queries, and we could work directly with the client. I think it makes possibly a bit more work for the client. It's not too bad for us, and it works well that way as well. It's probably a bit more efficient with the architect because you've got someone who's at a desk doing it all the time, rather than me popping home and doing bits as we go. But it works well both ways.
Just going back round to the whole tender process, are you setting out just to put in your best figure, or are you thinking we really need to win this? Does it just not matter to you in some ways?
It totally depends on our circumstances at the time. If we're really busy and we've got 2 years' work lined up, then we're not so fussed, so the prices probably will increase a bit. If we're running tight, running close to the end of a contract, got nothing lined up, then we're going to be a bit more competitive to try and push to win the jobs.
Have you ever had any hard times, thinking of recessions, things like that? How do you get through?
We've been very lucky that we've not been out of work. We've managed to keep going constantly. Hopefully we feel that's because we're decent and people will go with decent builders. Prices have had to get tighter at times, where it's got more competitive, and you're just coming closer to not having work, so you have to tighten up to ensure you get the work. But luckily we haven't been out of work at any stage.
When we set out, we had a budget and all of the tenders went over. So have you noticed any changes in pricing, costs? Have they gone up from your perspective, or is it just from a client's perspective?
I think costs have jumped quite considerably recently. Labour costs gone up quite a lot recently. Bricklayers are very expensive at the moment. There's a shortage, so I suppose with house building going on, that side of it's dearer. And I think with the euro, there's been a bit of an increase because obviously a lot of materials are imported. Insulation's gone up a hell of a lot over the last year. It's had quite a few price increases, probably 30% increase over the last year, which is quite big. And obviously timber and other bits and pieces all creep up, and it's awkward because we've been having to try and keep our prices similar in order to win the work. So there's less profit, so we're having to start to creep the prices up now. And
this being our particular situation that things did go beyond our budget, when we go through the value engineering process, is that quite standard for you as well, or just part of having a contract?
It's not something we've really had to do much of before. Normally we price it, and it's sort of those prices are looked at. If it is well over budget, then obviously the client has to look at where they can save money. It's a bit awkward on the new build. If it's extension works, you can think, well, we won't do all of it. Maybe not have the garage built, or
we weren't that good.
Leave a couple of bathrooms out or something like that. But I suppose it's awkward with the passive house thing. I think it's probably awkward to estimate how much the build's going to cost before you start getting the tenders in.
Is this exciting to be doing a passive house? Because there must be some learning curve involved.
I think it's interesting. I probably lost a bit of excitement a few years ago, but I enjoy the challenge. It's interesting to have to think of other things, and I think it's quite interesting to have a challenge that you've got to try and meet this, more or less zero air tightness reading at the end. So I look forward to achieving it, and always look forward to seeing the end product.
Well, we'll catch up with you again further down the line, but for now, Mark, thank you very much.
Thanks.
Head online to take a look at the show notes for this session. They're at houseplanninghelp.com/211. You can review the key points. Also, if you have a comment or you'd like to ask a question, there's a place to do that at the bottom of the show notes. We'll link across to Mark at Mars Builders, houseplanninghelp.com/211. Couple of things to finish up on. Firstly, an iTunes review. I haven't read one of those out for a while, but this one comes from Two Trees, and the title is Top Pod for Any Budding Self-Builder. This is a quality resource for a wide range of snackable self-build content and many self-build journeys. Ben has an excellent podcast style, and I've really enjoyed them. Thank you, Two Trees. And as we always say, you don't have to be on iTunes wherever you're picking the podcasts up. There's normally an option to review the podcast, but just give others an idea of what it's all about. We're always trying to open this up to as many people as possible, but that would be much appreciated if you've enjoyed what you've heard today or on any of the other occasions. And finally, a hub update. What's the hub? Well, this is the premium section of House Planning Help. We're always aiming to make the self-build journey easier, and I'm sure the hub will go through constant improvement, just trying to hone it down so that for minimum time you get maximum out. And the main thing, I suppose, really is about steering you clear of any of the major pitfalls that might be awaiting you. So is it right for you? Well, I guess you're going to have to decide that yourself, but I'll say yes, it's right for you if you're someone who wants to build an eco home. You're interested in sustainability, perhaps it's the material side of things. Maybe, like me, you want to go passive house. Maybe at the end, once you've got the house sorted, you're thinking renewables. It's right for you if you're that kind of person. It's also right for you if you're hoping to build in the UK, because it's very difficult to cover around the world. So we just said, look, let's just deal with our doorstep here. So it's right for you if you're looking to build in the UK. And it's right for you if you've got the time, because that's the thing about digital resources, videos, it's time consuming once you get stuck into it. We hope it will be worth your while. That's the whole point of it. The courses, the videos, the forum. So yes, if you've got some time on your hands, it won't be a good fit for you really if you're just looking to build the cheapest house possible. Just want to hit building regs. That's me. Well, don't look any further, because that's not what we're all about. Also, if you don't like digital learning, perhaps you prefer reading in a book or a magazine, maybe one day we can write a book, but at the moment we just don't offer that. So digital learning, you have to be into that. And if your construction's underway, there's probably a limited amount of help we can be. I'm sure you would enjoy it, but yeah, once that's happened, I guess we're not such a big influence on your journey. But it's always interesting to hear the different challenges that come up. So go and find out more information about the hub if this is a tool for, oh, hold on, this is all about me. houseplanninghelp.com/join. That's your lot. There we go. Thanks for listening. The House Planning Help podcast is produced by Regen Media, content that matters.